My name is Hazel Anderson, and today marks my 30th birthday. I live with my husband, Philip, who is 5 years older than me, and our 5-year-old son, R. We're a small but happy family of three. Today, Philip and I are attending a wedding. While I'm technically calling them friends, they are more of Philip's acquaintances. I only know them by face. The wedding is held at a stunningly luxurious hotel. As I step inside, I can't help but admire the opulence, the kind of place that leaves you slightly breathless. While Philip mingles and exchanges greetings with familiar faces, I excuse myself and head to the restroom. On my way back, a voice drifts through the corridor, harsh and full of malice. "Would you look at that defective thing? What's she even doing here?" The words stop me in my tracks. My stomach twists as the voices grow louder, clearly meant to be heard. "Mom, why would you say that?" "Oh, it's true. Why is someone like her even here? Surely, she wasn't invited." Their words are unmistakably meant for me, but they don't address me directly. The hostility is clear, yet I have no intention of engaging with such people. Ignoring them, I quicken my pace, hoping to leave the situation behind. "Hey, you ugly thing. I know you can hear me." I keep walking. My name is not "you ugly thing." However, the sound of hurried footsteps behind me makes my pulse quicken. Whoever it is, they haven't given up. Before I can react, someone grabs my arm forcefully, the grip tight enough to hurt. Startled, I turn to see a woman panting from exertion, glaring at me with venom in her eyes. "Don't you dare ignore me," she yells, her voice sharp and accusing. I yank my arm free, and the force of it sends her stumbling back. She lets out a dramatic gasp, as if I'd shoved her violently. "Julia, are you okay? Why are you acting like this? And you, how dare you behave so rudely?" Ignorance truly is a problem. Another woman scolds as she rushes over to support the first one. The pair stare at me, one with theatrical indignation and the other with outright hostility. "Excuse me," I say, my voice steady but cold. "What's going on? Who even are you?" The second woman's expression twists in disbelief. "Who am I? Have you forgotten me already?" How typical of someone so self-centered and rude. I blink, caught off guard by her accusatory tone. "I'm sorry, but have we met before?" Her eyebrows shoot up in shock, as if my question is somehow outrageous. "Huh? What are you even talking about?" the woman scoffed, her tone dripping with disdain. "Do you honestly think you have the right to act like this, someone with just a high school diploma? Let me jog your unfortunate memory. I'm your sister, Julia. Remember that name? And this woman right here is our mother. Are you seriously going to claim you've forgotten your own mother?" I tilted my head slightly, offering her a dismissive smile. "Oh, Julia? Yes. Maybe there was someone by that name in my past." It was clear from the look on their faces that my nonchalant response had struck a nerve. Their anger boiled over as their expressions hardened further. Before the exchange could escalate, two men approached hurriedly, their presence drawing attention. "What's all this noise?" one of them asked. "Julia, you're supposed to be getting ready. Why are you still in your regular clothes? You need to change for the ceremony." "Dad, Daniel," Julia exclaimed, seizing the opportunity to point dramatically in my direction. "This suspicious person sneaked into our wedding. We need to kick her out immediately." The man referred to as Dad scowled, his expression souring the moment he looked at me. Meanwhile, Daniel, standing beside him, froze in place. His eyes widened in shock, and his complexion turned pale as though he'd just seen a ghost. "What is she doing here?" Dad sneered. "Of all days, we had to see her on such an important occasion?" "Exactly," Julia chimed in. "She must have gotten in by mistake. This is intolerable. Somebody call security, now." "Wait just a second," Daniel stammered, his voice cracking as he raised his hands. "Julia, be careful with your words. This person is—" he faltered, visibly shaken, while the others failed to grasp the gravity of the situation. I muttered under my breath, "Humph. You really don't know anything, do you?" But my quiet remark went unnoticed amidst the commotion. Suddenly, a familiar voice called out behind me. Hazel, there you are. I've been looking all over for you. Turning around, I saw my husband, Philip, walking toward me. His calm yet firm demeanor immediately silenced the escalating chaos as all eyes shifted to him. He appeared momentarily surprised but quickly assessed the situation. Sorry, I said, giving him a wry smile as I stepped closer to him. I got caught up with some peculiar people. Philip's sharp gaze flicked over to Julia and the rest of the group. He murmured a quiet "ah," clearly piecing together what was going on. His quick understanding was one of the reasons I admired him so much. Julia, who had been staring at Philip as though mesmerized, snapped out of it when I stood by his side. Her expression twisted with fury, and she shot daggers at me with her eyes. The two older individuals, Mom and Dad, as they claimed, looked utterly confused, while Daniel seemed on the verge of a meltdown.
He was the first to speak.
Mr. Anderson, I sincerely apologize, he blurted out, bowing his head slightly. My wife said some things she shouldn't have. I'm so sorry to both of you. Julia, you need to apologize too. But Julia was having none of it. Her voice rose, shrill and defensive. Why should I apologize? She's the one who should be apologizing. This disrespectful woman barged into our wedding. She's an embarrassment to the family, and honestly, we should have cut ties with her ages ago. Wait, family? Philip asked, his surprise evident. His gaze darted back and forth between me and Julia as he tried to make sense of her claim. Just then, the older couple, Julia's supposed parents, decided to chime in. Oh dear, Daniel, Dad began, shaking his head in exaggerated disappointment.
We're so sorry about this.
Hazel is, well, she's our problematic eldest daughter. Honestly, she's such a disgrace that we've avoided mentioning her altogether. We kicked her out of the house 9 years ago, and we've been trying to keep that shameful chapter buried. How she found out about Julia's wedding, I'll never know. But surely, she's here to cause trouble. Exactly, Julia added, her finger jabbing in my direction, once more. She's probably here to ruin my big day. Philip's expression darkened, his calm demeanor replaced by cold indignation. But before he could respond, I took a deep breath and stepped forward. Are you all done? I asked, my voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. The sheer composure in my tone silenced everyone, leaving the air thick with tension. The show wasn't over yet. It was just getting started. As the memories of my past flooded back, I stood in the grand hotel ballroom, facing the people who once called themselves my family. Julia's cutting remarks echoed through the room, dripping with the same disdain I'd endured for years. Daniel, Julia continued, her voice thick with mockery. Don't listen to her. This woman has always been useless, a parasite. She didn't even attend university. After high school, she loafed around doing meaningless part-time jobs. A complete embarrassment. Their words might have hurt me once, but not anymore. I glanced at Julia, her smug smile, and at my so-called parents, who stood nodding in agreement as if their cruelty were justified. They had always treated me as the defective older sibling, unworthy of love or respect. Their attention and resources had been lavished solely on Julia, the beautiful, perfect daughter. I had been nothing more than an afterthought, a shadow cast by her brilliance. What they didn't know was how far I'd come since they last saw me. Their disdain only fueled my drive back then. I had left their toxic grasp behind 9 years ago, building a life for myself piece by piece. Every bitter word they spoke only strengthened my resolve to succeed. In my teenage years, I had recorded their abuse, capturing their cruel words on tape. Those recordings became both a reminder of the battles I had endured and proof of their mistreatment. I could still hear their voices in my mind. Hazel, you're a defect, my father had spat. You'll never amount to anything. No university for you. Start working after high school and contribute financially to this house. You should be thankful we've even let you live this long. You owe us a debt of gratitude, my mother chimed in. Unlike Julia, who's our pride and joy, you'll never achieve anything. But you can at least be useful to us. Julia's taunts were just as sharp. "Don't worry, Mom and Dad," she would say with a sweet smile. "I'll make up for Hazel's failures. I'll become a doctor and take over the family clinic. I'll make you proud." Every word they spoke back then only hardened my resolve to leave them behind. After high school, I worked countless part-time jobs while secretly saving money. Despite their belittling remarks, I had rented an apartment in secret. I kept my income understated, ensuring they couldn't demand too much from me financially. I also began investing, growing my savings little by little. By the time they decided I was too distracting for Julia's studies and kicked me out, I was more than ready to leave. I walked away from their house without looking back, knowing they'd never expect me to make it on my own. To them, my absence was a relief, and they quickly moved on, focusing all their attention on Julia. 9 years later, I had built a stable life, one far removed from their toxic reach. I had a family of my own now, a loving husband, and a wonderful son. I had achieved more than they ever thought possible for me. And now, standing in this lavish hotel with Philip by my side, I faced the people who had cast me aside as worthless. "Are you done?" I finally said, my voice calm but firm. Julia blinked, momentarily thrown off by my composure. "Done," she sneered. "Hardly. You've always been pathetic, Hazel, and now you're here trying to ruin my wedding. It's disgusting." I stepped forward, meeting her glare with unshakable confidence. "If anyone here is pathetic, Julia, it's the people who believe their worth comes from tearing others down. You've had 9 years to grow, but it seems you're still the same spoiled, small-minded girl you always were." The room fell silent. My parents' faces twisted in shock and fury, but Philip stood unwavering beside me, his presence grounding me. Turning to my parents, I continued, "You think I'm here to ruin your day? I'm not. I came as a guest, invited by my husband, Phillip Anderson. And unlike you, he knows what it means to love and support someone unconditionally." Julia's fiancé, Daniel, shifted uncomfortably, glancing between his bride and me. Philip spoke up then, his voice low but commanding. "Hazel is the strongest, most intelligent woman I've ever met. Whatever issues you have with her are your own failings, not hers." I saw Julia flinch at Philip's words, her confidence faltering for the first time. "You can hold on to your bitterness and your false sense of superiority," I said, my voice steady. "But know this. I don't need your validation. I haven't for a long time." With that, I turned to Philip and linked my arm through his. "Let's go," I said softly. As we walked away, I felt the weight of years of neglect and pain lifting from my shoulders. The past was behind me now. My family wasn't the people standing in that room, steeped in toxicity. My family was Philip and our son, people who truly loved and valued me. Julia and my parents could stew in their bitterness, but I had chosen a different path. I had chosen freedom. I turned to Philip, his question hanging in the air, and for a moment, I hesitated. Then, with calm resolve, I responded, "They were once. But family isn't defined by blood alone. It's about love, respect, and care. And by those standards, I wouldn't consider them family anymore." Philip nodded, his expression thoughtful, then turned his attention to Julia. His voice was steady, but there was a distinct edge of authority to it. "Julia," he said, "it's one thing to insult someone privately, but to do so in public and on your wedding day is deeply unbecoming. You don't elevate yourself by putting others down, especially someone like Hazel, who has shown nothing but grace despite your constant hostility." Julia opened her mouth to respond, but Philip raised a hand to silence her. "And as for your comments about Hazel's education," he continued, his tone hardening, "let me be clear. Hazel is more than my wife. She is my partner, my equal, and the person I trust most in this world. Her intelligence, character, and strength are qualities I admire deeply. Whatever education she has or doesn't have does not define her value. Perhaps you'd do well to learn that before passing judgment on others." Julia's face turned an angry shade of red, but Philip wasn't finished. "As for our son," he said, his gaze shifting briefly to Daniel, He is our greatest treasure, and I will ensure he receives the best care possible. Daniel, I appreciate your professional opinion, but Hazel and I will decide what's best for our as his parents. Daniel, looking increasingly uncomfortable, nodded quickly. Of course, Dr. Anderson. I didn't mean to overstep. The room fell silent as my parents and Julia stared at Philip, their surprise at his calm but devastating words etched across their faces. Philip then turned back to me, offering his arm. Shall we go, Hazel? I think we've endured enough of this toxic atmosphere. I took his arm without hesitation, feeling a surge of pride and gratitude for the man standing beside me. As we turned to leave, my father finally spoke, his voice trembling with disbelief. Wait, Philip. Anderson General Hospital, your family runs it, doesn't it? Philip stopped, his expression impassive as he turned to face my parents. That's correct, he said simply. And let me assure you, Hazel is the most important part of my life, more than the hospital, more than anything else. She doesn't need to prove her worth to anyone, least of all people who should have cherished her from the start. Julia scoffed, but it was clear she had no comeback. My mother opened her mouth, perhaps to apologize or excuse her behavior, but Philip didn't give her the chance. Goodbye, he said firmly. And for Hazel's sake, let's keep our interactions to a minimum from now on. With that, Philip and I walked away, leaving behind the people who had once caused me so much pain. As we stepped out into the evening air, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Philip squeezed my hand gently, and I smiled up at him, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the life I'd built away from the toxicity of my past. Thank you, I said softly. He smiled back. For what? For standing up for me. For reminding me what real family looks like. Philip's smile widened, and he pulled me close. You don't need to thank me for that. You deserve nothing less, Hazel. Always. As we walked toward the car, I felt a deep sense of peace. My past may have been filled with pain, but my future was one I had built with love, strength, and dignity. And that was something no one could ever take away. Impossible. It's impossible, Julia muttered, her voice trembling as the color drained from her face. Her previously smug demeanor had crumbled, replaced by a look of shock and disbelief. How could someone like you achieve all that, she spat. Though her voice lacked the venom it usually carried, it was clear that the weight of the revelations was sinking in. I sighed, shaking my head. You always underestimated me, Julia. You and our so-called parents were so consumed by your own arrogance that you never even considered the possibility that I could succeed. You wanted to hold me down, but all you did was push me to rise higher. My mother's face twisted into anger, though there was a flicker of desperation in her eyes. Hazel, we're still your parents. How dare you speak to us this way? After all we've done for you. All you've done for me? I repeated, my voice calm but firm. You mean the years of abuse, neglect, and constant belittling? If that's your definition of parenting, then no, I owe you nothing. I built my life on my own, with no help from you. I owe my success to my hard work, not to the people who tried to crush my spirit. Philip stepped forward, his protective presence beside me making me feel even stronger. Let me make one thing clear, he said, addressing my parents with a steely gaze. Hazel is my wife, my partner, and the mother of our child. She doesn't need your approval or your validation. And if you ever think of trying to interfere in her life again, you'll have to deal with me. The authority in his voice was unmistakable, and my parents visibly flinched. Daniel, who had been watching the entire exchange with a mix of disbelief and dawning realization, finally spoke. Julia, is this true? Have you and your parents really treated Hazel like this? She's lying, Julia exclaimed, though her voice wavered. She's making it all up to make us look bad. Daniel shook his head, his expression grim. You're the one who's lying. I've seen how Hazel conducts herself, calm, composed, and accomplished. Meanwhile, you've been nothing but dismissive and hostile toward her since the moment we saw her. The truth is written all over your face, Julia. Julia's protests faltered, And she turned toward our parents as if looking for support. But even they seemed at a loss for words, their previous confidence crumbling under the weight of their exposed lies. "Daniel," I said, addressing him directly for the first time, "you seem like a reasonable man. I hope for your sake that you're not dragged down by their toxicity. I wouldn't wish that kind of pain on anyone." He nodded slowly, his face pale but resolute. "Thank you, Hazel. And I'm sorry for how my wife and her family have treated you. You deserve better." I gave him a small, polite nod, then turned to Philip. "I think we've said everything we needed to say. Let's go." Philip smiled warmly and extended his arm. I took it, walking away from the people who had once been my family, but who no longer held any power over me. As we left the venue, I felt a profound sense of closure. The past I had worked so hard to leave behind had finally been confronted, and I emerged victorious, not through anger or revenge, but through the strength of my accomplishments and the love of the family I had built for myself. I glanced at Philip, who was carrying himself with the quiet confidence that had drawn me to him in the first place. And I thought of our son, who was growing up surrounded by love, respect, and encouragement, the kind of environment I had always dreamed of having as a child. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. I had reclaimed my life, and nothing from my past could ever hold me back again. The room descended into an uncomfortable silence as everyone processed the unraveling of Julia's carefully constructed facade. Her face, once filled with confidence and superiority, now flushed with panic and desperation. Daniel's stern expression didn't falter. "It's a simple question, Julia. Name one professor. Just one." Julia fidgeted, her eyes darting around as if searching for an escape. I don't have to prove anything to you. She's just trying to humiliate me with lies." Philip stepped forward, his calm yet commanding presence drawing everyone's attention. No one is trying to humiliate anyone here. But when someone builds their life on falsehoods, the truth inevitably comes to light. Julia's parents, who had been watching in stunned silence, suddenly spoke up, their voices tinged with desperation. "Daniel, please," her father said, his voice trembling. "This is all a misunderstanding. Julia has always been an exemplary daughter. Hazel is just trying to create problems out of jealousy." Her mother quickly chimed in.
Yes.
"Julia is our pride and joy. She's the one who stayed by our side, supported the family. Don't let Hazel's bitterness poison your marriage." But Daniel was unmoved. "Supported the family? From what I've seen today, Hazel is the one who endured years of mistreatment and still managed to build a successful life. If anything, it seems Julia has been riding on lies and entitlement." Julia's mother turned on me, her face contorted with rage. This is all your fault. You've always been a troublemaker. Why couldn't you just disappear quietly after we let you go? Why come back and ruin everything?" I met her glare with unwavering calm. "I didn't come here to ruin anything. You're the ones who approached me, hurling insults and trying to demean me. If you had ignored me, I would have left quietly. But as always, you can't resist trying to control everything, even when the truth is staring you in the face." Julia stomped her foot in frustration, her voice shrill. "You're nothing but a vindictive liar, Hazel. Daniel, you know me. You love me. Don't believe her." But Daniel shook his head, his expression resolute. "Love is built on trust, Julia. And right now, I'm struggling to find anything trustworthy about you." Philip took my hand, his steady warmth grounding me. "Hazel, let's go. There's no point in staying here any longer. The truth speaks for itself." As we turned to leave, Julia's voice rang out, desperate and filled with venom. "You think you've won, don't you? Just because you married into wealth and became a CEO. You think you're better than me." I stopped, turning back to face her one last time. "I don't think I'm better than anyone, Julia. But I do know this. I built my life through hard work and integrity. You built yours on lies and manipulation. If you're unhappy with where you are, that's on you, not me." With that, Philip and I walked away, leaving behind the wreckage of a family that had long ceased to be mine. As we exited the venue and stepped into the fresh evening air, I felt an overwhelming sense of closure. For years, I had carried the weight of their cruelty, their indifference, and their rejection. But now, standing beside my husband, with a life I had built through my own determination, I realized something profound. I was free. Free from their judgment, their toxicity, and their control. Philip squeezed my hand gently. "Are you okay?" I nodded, a genuine smile spreading across my face. For the first time in a long time, I really am. The past no longer had any power over me. I was no longer the discarded daughter, the unwanted sister. I was Hazel Anderson, a woman who had overcome adversity, reclaimed her worth, and built a life filled with love, respect, and success. And that was more than enough. After their clinic closed, my parents seemed to disappear from public life. I heard bits and pieces through distant relatives that they had sold their home to pay off debts and moved to a small apartment in another city. My sister, Julia, reportedly lived with them for a while but eventually left after constant arguments over money. Her marriage to Daniel had ended in divorce shortly after the disastrous events at their wedding. As for me, life moved forward with a sense of peace and clarity I hadn't known before. Philip and I focused on raising our son, and nurturing the life we had built together. My business flourished, and I found immense satisfaction in knowing I could provide for my family without any ties to the toxic relationships of my past. One day, while sorting through old files in my office, I came across the recordings and evidence I had saved from my time with my parents and sister. For a moment, I considered discarding them, those reminders of the pain and injustice I endured. But then I decided to keep them, not as a weight to carry, but as a testament to how far I had come. Philip walked in,
seeing me lost in thought.
"Everything okay?" he asked, his tone gentle. I smiled and nodded. "Yes, just looking at some old memories. It's strange to think about how different my life is now." He came over, wrapping his arms around me. "You've built something amazing, Hazel. You didn't just survive, you thrived. And I'm so proud of you." Leaning into his embrace, I felt a profound sense of gratitude, not for the hardships, but for the strength they forged within me. My family was no longer defined by blood or obligation, but by love, trust, and mutual respect. My parents and sister had once been my entire world, but now they were just a distant chapter in a story that was still unfolding. That night, as we sat at the dinner table with laughing over his latest kindergarten antics, I realized I had found everything I had once thought was out of reach: joy, stability, and unconditional love. The past could no longer hurt me. It had shaped me, yes, but it did not define me. And as I looked at my son's beaming face and my husband's warm smile, I knew I had finally found my true family, one built not on control and cruelty, but on compassion and choice. I was free. When I heard the news of the clinic's closure, I felt no sadness or triumph, just a quiet sense of relief. It seemed fitting that the people who once thrived on cruelty and negligence had finally faced the consequences of their actions. They had sown the seeds of their own downfall, and this closure felt like the natural conclusion to a story I had long since moved past. Later, I learned that Julia and Daniel had divorced, a revelation that barely surprised me. Their marriage, built on lies and manipulation, had always seemed destined to crumble. The lawsuit Daniel became embroiled in, followed by his dismissal from the hospital, was likely the final straw. As for Julia, she seemed fixated on surpassing my happiness, determined to prove that she could outshine me. But her choices only led her further down a destructive path. I heard that she began an affair with an older, married doctor, hoping to secure a more advantageous position in life. When the affair was exposed, the doctor's wife demanded compensation, turning Julia's life into a public scandal. Desperate and humiliated, Julia turned to our parents for help, but they disowned her almost immediately, branding her a disgrace to the family. This decision was ironic. considering how they had once championed her as their golden child. After that, news about Julia became increasingly vague. It was said that she struggled to reintegrate into society after her failed high school entrance exams and years of reclusiveness. Reports suggested she had turned to the nightlife industry for survival, a decision that eventually led to severe health issues and homelessness. Though I sometimes heard rumors about her fate, my interest in her life waned over time. She became a mere footnote in the story of my past. As for my former parents, their retirement plans unraveled quickly. Once respected professionals, they found themselves blacklisted, unable to secure positions as doctors or nurses due to their tarnished reputation. It seemed their years of mistreatment and neglect, not just toward me, but likely others as well, had caught up with them. Their downfall was poetic justice, but it didn't bring me joy or closure. It simply was. Now they exist only as distant memories. I don't think about them often, nor do I feel any need to engage with their ongoing struggles. My life has moved far beyond their toxic sphere. On the other hand, my son's health has improved dramatically. After consulting with a more reliable medical facility, we found that he didn't need to be hospitalized, and his condition responded well to proper medication. Watching him run around with boundless energy and curiosity brings me immeasurable joy and reminds me of why I fight so hard to create a stable, loving home. Phillip and I continue to build a life rooted in trust and compassion, a life far removed from the shadows of my childhood. Protecting my family is my greatest purpose now, and with each day, I feel more assured that I am succeeding. My past no longer defines me. The pain and injustice I endured have become lessons, not shackles. And as I hold my son's hand and walk forward with my husband by my side, I know I've found something far more meaningful than revenge. Peace.